the Birth Bootcamp podcast. I am Cheryl Ameling, the certification coordinator.
I am Liana Wolf, the administrator.
And today we have Ruth Hildreth here. She is one of our Birth Bootcamp instructors, and she's going to share her birth stories with us today. So welcome, Ruth.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be able to talk with y'all today.
Yeah, so are we. Thank you for taking time away from your babies and coming and hanging out with us. We appreciate it.
Of course, it's a nice break.
I'm sure it is. I'm like, sorry, honey, I'm going to go podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I say. So, okay, well, first tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, where are you from? How old are your kids? You tell us about being a birth boot camp instructor, things like that.
All right. So I'm from Texas, but I've been living in Georgia for almost 2 decades, and I've been married for almost 8 years. So I have an almost 4-year-old and a 2-year-old right now. And I got certified as a birthing instructor with Birth Boot Camp 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, and have been teaching birthing classes and all of that, which I love. So we've got a little farm here at home too. So we do a lot of different things.
Oh, wow. That's exciting. So what kind of animals do you have, or what do y'all do?
We have chickens, pigs, rabbits, cats, and dogs right now. So
wow. And then 2
it keeps
little
me
boys.
busy. Yeah, and 2 little boys. They're definitely part of the farm.
Yeah, totally. As rowdy and messy and demanding of your time as the other animals.
Yes.
I love that. I love it. Well, you want to jump in, Liana?
Sure. First off, I also have chickens and I love them.
They're so much fun. It has been the best having them.
I love that. Do you guys name your chickens?
Totally.
I did before I got too many to keep up with them.
Okay, that's fair.
That is a valid point. We only have 8. So it's easier to keep track of 8.
Yeah, I think we're over 35 right now. So I kind of gave up trying to keep up with names for everyone. A few of them have names, but not all of them.
Yeah, like your favorites.
Yeah, and my roosters have names.
Okay.
That's fair.
That's the point where you get the little ankle tags with the numbers on them so you can keep track of them.
Yeah.
I love that.
Okay. So, your first birth, you planned a home birth.
Yes, I did.
Which is so great. And we really want to hear about how that all went down, how you prepared for it, what made you want to do that home birth, and then just kind of tell us what happened.
Well, as far as being introduced into the home birth world, I have to give all the credit to my oldest sister, Morgan, for that. When she was pregnant with her first baby 13 years ago, her husband was deployed. And so she came back to live near us. And I got to see her go through the experience of working with a midwife and planning a home birth. And she also was a birthing assistant at that time. So that was like eye-opening for me because my mom has 6 kids and we were all C-section babies. So it was like total different path. So just going through that experience, I was actually like in the house when she gave birth to him, and I remember like hearing him cry, and I just remember being like, this is awesome. Like, I love that she just gave birth to my first nephew downstairs, and we were all here and home. And so that was definitely like the beginning of researching and wanting to learn more about it. And then when my husband and I were dating, I was like, just so you know, I'm going to do home births. And if you're not okay with that, you need to let me know right now, because that's a non-negotiable for me.
I love that.
And he was like, yeah, that's fine, of course. So my midwife, Debbie Fulmer, was a family friend who I had grown up knowing, and I grew up with her kids. And so it was also really nice having a relationship with her already and a friendship, and knowing I had this amazing woman I could trust going into this journey. So when we found out we were pregnant at the beginning of 2019, she was the second person I called to tell that I was pregnant.
Aww.
I was so excited. And, she was like, okay, well, you have to wait 12 weeks before you can actually come see me. And I was like, that's fine. I'm just so excited that we're finally doing this.
I love that.
So it was also interesting at that point because my husband was like, "Oh, you still want to do a home birth?" And I was like, "Yeah, remember we talked about this." So the first appointment with her was such a blessing because she just sat down with us and I think we talked for like 2 hours so that he could just ask questions and understand everything from her experience because she had been doing this for over 40 years at this point, I want to say at least, if not more.
Wow.
And so she was just so patient sitting there in her living room and answering every single question he had and going over all of his concerns. And we walked out of there and he was like, "This is great. I'm so excited. This is what we're going to do." And I just will always appreciate her willing to take that time to talk with a nervous husband because
Oh,
I have now done that for so many of my friends and their husbands and been like, "Let's talk through it together."
yeah.
So working with her was great. She has another midwife that she was working with, Maria Quinones, who is such an angel, and then an assistant midwife, Lydia McCoy, at the time. And so I got to work with three really amazing women through that entire pregnancy. And, you know, I didn't know any different. I thought appointments were always an hour long, and your midwives always asked about how you were mentally and learned about your family and just got to know you as a person. Like, I was like, this is what prenatal care should look like. And I had a friend who was pregnant at the same time, and it just blew my mind when we would like compare our appointments. And she would talk about how they never talked about diet, they never talked about water intake or supplements or anything. And I was like, really? And she was like, "Yeah." And my appointments last like 5, 10 minutes at the most. And I was just like, that is not good enough. That is not what we should be experiencing as women.
Yeah.
So I was just so thankful for those friendships that I got to grow through that experience. And then, preparing for a home birth definitely has a lot more that goes with it as far as like getting your birth kit ready and your birthing pool if that's something you're going to do and having the different things on hand. But my midwives were awesome and had a great list that they gave me that I could follow. So it seems like a lot, but as you slowly built it up and had your little stack in the corner of your room, to get ready for the moment. And well, then the actual moment came of going into labor. And that was really exciting. My water ended up breaking around
Mm.
midnight. And so I wasn't expecting that because that's kind of, in the movies, they're like, your water breaks first. And I was also before my due date, which was really surprising with the first baby.
Yeah.
So I went back to bed after calling them and letting them know what was going on. And they were like, "Yep, just sleep. Let's see what happens." So I woke up 3 or so hours later and was having some really good strong contractions. So I hopped in the shower, I drank a smoothie, just trying to get ready for everything. And I have really bad sickness during my pregnancies. And so, of course, one of the fun things about my labors was getting to throw up during my labors.
Oh gosh.
So that started really early on too, which was very challenging. And like we should have expected it, but we didn't. And so I didn't have anything I could take to help with it. So that followed me through my entire labor with Lincoln. So they came to my house once it started getting more intense and everything, and were helping me. And they checked me, and I was only 2 centimeters, which, feels really discouraging when you feel like you've already been putting in a lot of hard work for, I think at this point, it had been at least 7 or 8 hours. And
Yeah.
so the birthing pool was amazing. That was like, I loved it. It was so great being able to get in the pool and get relief. And they had me in it and they were getting me out and doing different things. But it was kind of during this time in labor that we figured out that Lincoln's head was not pushing on my cervix. And so I was not dilating at all, even though I was having contractions, that were 3 minutes apart, a minute long, like really strong and powerful, really, really bad back labor. And so we were hitting that point where we were like, all right, we've got to try to do some different things because you're not dilating, he's not putting pressure on your cervix and all that fun stuff. So they were trying to figure out a chiropractor to call to come to my house to adjust me. And that is interesting, trying to figure that out. But we ended up getting a hold of one finally, and this awesome. Dr. Denoff came to my house. It was a rainy December day, and he was in like a trench coat and boots and like came marching into my bedroom. And I was completely naked on my bed, and they like draped a blanket over me. But it was so amazing because he drove over 30 minutes to my house to come adjust me. Like, I will forever appreciate
Wow,
that. So
yeah.
he adjusted me in labor. And then my midwife, Maria, did a lot of rebozo work trying to get Lincoln to shift out of the birth canal and just get things realigned. And unfortunately, none of it was working. And I was in that fear, tension, pain cycle at this point after having labored for over 16 hours and was not able to calm down at all, like just fighting through the contractions. It was very, very challenging. So Debbie was like, well, you want to go to the hospital? And I remember looking at her going, no, I planned a home birth. We're having this baby at home. I don't want to go to the hospital. She was like, okay, I just wanted. And I said, why would we even go? And she was like, well, to get an epidural. And I was like, no, but that wasn't my plan. That's not what I wanted.
Yeah.
So I think we spent another 3 hours at home and still had no progression at all past 3 centimeters because of the position he was in and my inability to relax at that point. And we finally decided to go to the hospital up in Atlanta. So I had already been working with a backup doctor who was really great, Dr. Boots Taylor. And he supported my midwife and knew the situation and was fine with doing hospital transfers. So we drove an hour up there, and it was a blessing to be able to transfer into a hospital that was very respectful of the situation. And everyone was like, that's great. Let's just figure out what we need to do now moving forward. Like, there was no ugliness. There was just a lot of really wonderful, supportive people to work with. And I am so thankful for that because I know that's not the experience a lot of home birth transfers deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so great. Oh, so good.
So I got nausea medication, and that was a blessing to finally stop throwing up some at that point. And I got an epidural, which has always terrified me, just knowing how that works and everything. But in that moment, I was just so incredibly thankful. It was such a huge blessing to be able to receive that help after, let's see here, we were about 22, 23 hours into labor at this point when I got an epidural of active labor. So
And how
I was
far dilated?
exhausted.
Yeah. How far dilated were you at that point?
3 centimeters still.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It was time for an epidural.
So yes.
Yeah.
And I like passed out and fell asleep immediately when they gave it to me because I was so exhausted.
Yeah.
And I think I slept for like 2 or 3 hours, and I woke up and they came in and they were checking on me. And the nurse was like, all right, is it all right if I check you? And I said, yes. And she was like, oh, you're 8 centimeters.
Wow.
And I was like, that's not even fair. I just took a nap and I'm 8 centimeters now. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So it was very smooth from that point on, just having the pain management. My epidural was a lot stronger than I wish it had been. I had zero mobility whatsoever, like could not feel my feet or my legs at all. I know some women have like the ability to have some movement still, and I did not. It was very strong. So that was hard because I could not move around in bed or do anything. But we just hung out for a little while, and then I remember just a weird feeling and being like, okay, something just moved. And so they checked me again, and they were like, all right, well, you're 9 centimeters with a lip now. And I was like, okay. And they're like, well, we're going to start, getting ready to push. And so I had to push on my back, of course, which was not ideal, but my amazing midwives had come with me to the hospital. They never left me. So I had both of them there supporting me, and my husband and my mom. And so it was awesome having them there. And my midwife, Lydia, like, I will forever have like this memory embedded of just what a rock star she was during the pushing and how much she encouraged me and just reminded me how to breathe correctly and to hold my legs and, just do the things I needed to do to progress well. She was so encouraging, and she did not for a second waver in supporting me in that. And she is one of my dear, dear friends. So I pushed for an hour, which again was short considering I had an epidural and it was a first time baby and everything. It felt a lot longer than an hour. But
yeah, that's great.
the doctor was amazing, and he actually let my husband catch, which was really, really cool experience for him. He was not expecting to get to do that. And it was funny because as soon as Lincoln was born, he pooped all over my husband. And he was like, yeah, that's quite an experience.
That's hilarious. I love
I
that.
was like, you won't forget it. So, and I mean, everything from that point on was exactly how I was wanting, with immediate skin to skin and nursing. And I did not tear at all, which was also just
Great.
insane with a first birth and an epidural. That's very unlikely. And so I was really thankful for that. And, we waited to cut the cord. And I mean, we just overall had a really great experience with Atlanta Medical Center. And it was so funny. The nurse who was my delivery nurse, she recognized our last name. And then she realized that my mother-in-law taught her kindergarten years and years and years ago.
Oh my gosh,
And
how
she was like,
funny.
and we were like, no
Whoa.
way, like that would be our nurse that we would get, who already had a connection with the family. So that was really neat.
That's amazing.
That's, I love when connections are discovered like that. I think it's just
Yes.
so fun. Mhm.
Mhm.
And Dr. Boots Taylor was so amazing through everything. I mean, he dealt with me. I was really tense when we first got to the hospital, just because, it wasn't what I was wanting. And I sat there telling him everything I was not going to allow. And he just looked at me and smiled. And he said, "You're in control here. We're going to let you do what you want to do." And I was like, okay, that's right.
Oh,
But once we were in the labor and or the recovery room, he came in and just sat with us, and he said, "Tell me how you feel about your birth. Let's talk about this together." And
Wow.
I'm just like, could there be a better doctor who wants to just come in there and sit with you and ask how you feel? And like, he was amazing.
I've
So
I've never heard of OBs who do that.
Yeah,
Like
me either.
midwives, yeah, but I've never heard of OBs who come in and do that. That's amazing.
That is.
yeah, he was a high risk specialist, and he's not currently practicing anymore, which makes me so sad. Like, he still is supporting the birthing community, but he's not doing births anymore. But he was just amazing. Like, I wish every doctor could be like him when it came to how he dealt with me in labor and handled all the situations and just continued to support me.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that you felt supported every step of the way. Like that is so important. Penny Simpkin talks about that, how like it really doesn't matter like the mode of delivery, or like if your labor was long or short, or if it was painful or not. Like it was that you were in control and that you felt cared for and heard and loved along the way. And it really, I mean, it makes a huge difference, especially being a hospital transfer. Like that wasn't your plan.
Yeah.
Like you
No.
said, like I'm having this baby here. This was the plan. And so when the plan changes, like thinking about the hospital being a tool that we have and epidurals being a tool that we have, like, and then it and then the hospital making that an experience that isn't awful, because
Yes.
It was still positive. It was still supportive. It wasn't,
right,
they didn't use that horrible phrase of failed home birth. Like,
right,
no, that's not a thing.
Yeah,
right.
exactly. Like, we utilized the tools when we needed
Yes.
them. And
Yes.
like, at no point was I upset that that's what happened. I was just so thankful for such a supportive team to work
Yes.
28 hours of labor. And I came out of it so happy and satisfied with my experience. And that was such a blessing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that like the actual people that were involved in your birth were the ones who made that the positive experience. They could have made it the exact opposite and they didn't. And you came out of it feeling powerful and amazing and like, still that I did it moment, even though it was in a different bed than you had anticipated.
Yeah. Yes, definitely different. But now I could not be more thankful for the experience as an instructor, because
Right.
I can relate with all my hospital birth people that I teach with, and I can understand what they're going to go through to an extent.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I love every bit of that. Um, okay, so then how far apart are your births? So let's talk about your second birth. So how far apart are they?
They are 21 months apart in age. So I
Okay.
got pregnant when my oldest was 1, which is close. It was a lot, but we were like, we're
Those are
ready for
my
another
first two.
baby.
Yeah. I
So
always figure I wasn't sleeping anyway, so just add on another baby, like,
yeah. Well, I was still breastfeeding him when I got pregnant. And so I breastfed about 2 months into my second pregnancy before he decided to wean. And I was
Okay.
like, okay. So yeah, I was sharing my body through pregnancy or breastfeeding for a very, very long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was exactly what happened with my first and second. They're also 21 months apart.
All
Also
right.
because we were like, why not?
Mhm.
Yeah.
We're
We're like,
still
he's
changing
so
diapers, we're
much
still
fun.
waking up, we're still nursing. Like, let's just keep it going. And yeah,
Yeah.
he also decided he was done nursing. Yeah, on his
Yeah.
own.
Which, I mean, that was really easy that he weaned himself. Like, it made me sad, but he was 16 months old. So I was like, okay, my goal was at least a year. So I was like, this is fine.
Yeah. I love that. Okay, so how did you guys prepare for your second birth? Did you do anything different? Did you like mentally, emotionally, did you plan another home birth? Like what tell us about that journey.
Yeah. So I did take birthing classes before my first baby. It was required by my midwives. I forgot to mention that earlier. And those were good and helped me learn a lot. But one thing that I have realized since then is that there was not a whole lot of precedence put on the relaxation in labor. Like she gave us the understanding of labor and, a lot of useful information, but she really did not spend a lot of time talking about how important the relaxation is. So during my second pregnancy, we immediately planned for another home birth. I knew that's what that was still my goal. And I was so excited for another opportunity. It was definitely more nerve-wracking the second time because I knew how it felt going through labor and what to
Hmm.
expect to a point. And so that was harder, but we decided we worked with the same midwives. And unfortunately, during my pregnancy, Debbie Fulmer ended up passing away. And
Oh,
so that was really hard. She
I'm
had been dealing with
sorry.
cancer for a couple of years. So it was a pregnancy with a lot of emotions for different reasons, but I was really thankful for Maria
Yeah.
and Lydia were there. And, we had such a great relationship and they are just amazing women to continue to work with. So during that pregnancy is when I certified with birth boot camp as an instructor. And so I, in a sense, took birthing classes all over again during my certification
Yeah, you
and
did.
did it all with Cheryl. And so that really was whenever I was like, all right, this relaxation thing is a really big deal.
Yeah.
And Cheryl and I were doing our classes together, and we would take turns reading the relaxation techniques to one another. And I was well into my second trimester during this time and everything. So that just really opened my eyes to this whole other aspect of preparing for labor that I really had not done before. So my husband and I were working on the relaxation techniques together, and I was working on them by myself. And it was just something that I made happen a lot leading up to the birth with my second son. And then before he was born, I sat my husband down and I retaught him classes.
I love
I was
that.
like, we need to brush you up on all of this and make sure you're ready. So I got to use the birth boot camp information to sit down and go over the home birth class with him again, which was really good because he hadn't been pleasure reading books about birth like I had leading up into this point. So he needed a little refresher. I went into labor early again by a couple of days with my second, which was such a blessing. I was beyond sick. I had to do doctor visits and IV treatments and was in bed a lot. And that was all really hard with the baby, well, with a toddler.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we kind of had a feeling at that point that it was likely that we weren't going to be able to get pregnant again just because of some health issues and concerns that I was having throughout my pregnancy. So that was like good and bad because I was like, this might be my last chance to have a home birth. And that's something I wanted so desperately. So I worked really hard just physically preparing myself and eating well and drinking my water and doing my relaxation. So I went into labor with Harper. So I pre-labored with him for 3 days, which was a new
Mhm.
experience. And oh my goodness, was that mentally draining.
Yeah.
Just knowing you're close, but it's not actual labor. And it was a lot in the middle of the night. And so losing a lot of sleep was very challenging. So the third night I had been doing that, I finally got up because I was hurting bad enough. I was ready to go sit on my ball. I got my essential oils going. I turned on my relaxation music, and I finally woke my husband up probably around 4 or 5 a.m. and he was helping me with hip compressions and all of that. And so I stood up to walk across the room and my water broke on the floor and I was so excited. I was like, we're done with the pre-labor. We're actually here.
Yeah.
So I labored with my husband for a while, and my midwife, Lydia, lived less than 5 minutes away from me at the time. And so she went ahead and came by to check me, and she was like, all right, you're 3 centimeters, you're looking good, but I want you to get back into bed and rest. And that is another thing I feel like people think once they hit labor, they're like, you just need to go, go, go. You need to walk, you need to move around. And there is such an importance in resting in labor as well. And so we got in bed, and my husband did hip compressions on me during every single contraction for almost 2 hours while we laid in bed together and rested. And so
Nice.
he was amazing. He was there for all of it. The best doula. So once it started picking up again, my midwives gave me permission to get in my bathtub just to start using some water to relax and everything. And it was at that point where I hit the moment and I was like, I am ready for my midwives to be here. I need them. I remember just like that hit emotionally of being like, I can't do this alone anymore. I need them here. And so my husband called them. He had already worked on setting up the birth pool earlier, which was a blessing because I was so ready to get in the pool. So I went into my living room and was laboring, and it was really rough at that point. Just being able to stay on top of the contractions. And that is when my transition started to hit. So I was laying on the floor in my living room and my midwives walked in the door. And I remember Maria looked at me and she was like, oh, you do not look good. And I was like, yeah, I know. Because,
Like,
you're not
thanks.
talking, but in your mind, you're thinking all these things.
Yeah.
Because I had been throwing up again my whole labor. And so she immediately was like, all right, we're going to check to see if we need to put an IV in just to see if we need to hydrate you. And she was like, you know what? I'm going to check your dilation first. So she checked me and the biggest grin lit up on her face. And she went, you're 9 centimeters. And I was
Oh
like,
my gosh.
I've
Wow.
done it. And it was just like the best feeling ever to be like, I'm at home and I'm at 9 centimeters. I have progressed past that point, which I wasn't able to get to before. And even in my head at that moment, I remember thinking, I am going through transition right now. Like, I'm showing all the signs for transition, but I was also scared because I was like, well, what if it's not
Yeah.
actually transition? And I'm like hyping myself up for that. So I was like, please let me get into the pool. And she was like, of course. So I crawled on to my pool and I got a little break. It was really nice. It kind of gave me a lull for a second before my contractions picked up. And I think 2 contractions later, I felt my entire body push, which was a whole new feeling after having an epidural the first time. And I remember my eyes went wide and I looked at her and I was like, you just moved down. And she was like, that's great. When you feel ready, like you can push again. And so I did, and he moved down a lot, and I was able to feel his head at that point and everything. And so at this point, my husband was in the pool with me, behind me, supporting me, and my midwife and one of her assistants were on the outside of the pool, just monitoring everything. And they were wiping my face down with a wet rag, which just felt like heaven, and were supporting me. So once he started crowning, I leaned back on my husband and my midwife was like, lock eyes with me. I'm going to tell you what to do, how to breathe through this moment. And, we did all of that. And his head came out, and that was sweet relief at that moment because I had not gotten to experience the ring of fire and how all that felt the first time around. So it was new and it was special. So his shoulder got stuck at that point, which was not ideal, but it was just sticky shoulder. It was not a full dystocia. And so my amazing midwife about dived halfway into the birthing pool and put her fingers and twisted him. And he came out immediately at that point, was on my chest. So from beginning of active labor to him being on my chest was 7 hours,
Wow.
which was a
Nice.
huge
Nice.
difference from that first time
Nice.
around.
Yeah.
And I mean, I just burst into tears at that point because I was sitting there like in my living room in my birthing pool holding my baby, and I looked at my midwife and I was like, I love you so much, and you did this, like you got me through this. And yeah, I was a mess, and it was the best moment ever. So I was incredibly thankful again to have such a support network and those amazing women who just poured into me during my pregnancy and birth. But I have never in my life felt as powerful as I did in that moment, having had my successful home birth.
I love that. I I don't even know what to say. That's the like that's the goal, right? Is that we feel powerful in those moments. And so I love, love, love that you experience that. That I love that those are the words that you use to describe your experience. That's what I
Like
love
I
about it.
just talking about it, I feel like I want to cry again. And like,
Yeah.
I feel that emotional high of just having succeeded in something that I wanted so badly, but also just it was amazing how easy my recovery was after that experience too, like getting
Yeah.
to crawl into my own bed and nurse, and I didn't tear once again, which was such a blessing. And I felt so much better after that than I had after the hospital birth with the epidural. Like my body responded a lot better, obviously, because there weren't different drugs in my system. And I mean, I remember I stayed up the rest of the day because he was born at like 10 a.m. and I just felt so good. I was like, I don't
Yeah.
even want to sleep. I just want to look at him.
Oh,
I
I
love
love
that.
that. So good. Um, I mean, do you have any favorite parts of either of your births? I feel like you just had such good experiences, even with the hospital transfer. Like, is there anything that really sticks out in your brain as just a favorite moment or specific thoughts that ran through your brain? Anything?
I mean, having my husband willing to learn alongside me and to step into the role of fully supporting me during my pregnancies and my births was so huge because so many husbands walk into a birth and have no idea what's going on or what to do or how to help. And so that was such a huge blessing because he really was my rock with the hip compressions and the counter pressure and just being there and encouraging me. And that was such a blessing. But I mean, having my midwives willing to step in and do the same thing, they were not midwives that sat on the sidelines. I mean, they were there for me and encouraging me and supporting me. And they didn't care how long they were at my house or, they made me feel like I was the only person that mattered during my labors. And that is
Yeah.
something that is so invaluable because those memories are so seared into your mind after the experience you go through. And I don't think people give women enough credit for that, whether it was a good or a bad experience. You're not going to forget it. And that's why it's so important just to be such a rock for the woman who's going through it in that moment. And so I'm forever thankful for Maria and Lydia and Debbie and just how much they put me first and made me feel that way.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Good
So,
midwives are just worth their weight in gold, I tell you.
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
They're amazing.
they are. And I love now, like, I have been able to talk with multiple acquaintances and friends who, people who I haven't necessarily known who've reached out to me wanting to understand my experience with home birth and ask me a lot of questions and who have now themselves had successful home births. And that is just so exciting because I'm like, I get to share the excitement and the amazingness of it. And I don't feel like I'm a pushy home birther. I'm like, if that's not for you, it's not for you. But I love getting to share my experience and encouragement and just be like, this
Yeah.
could be your experience too.
Right. I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Okay, so where can we find you? Like on social media, your website?
Yes, I have a website. It's called Ruth's Birthing, and I am also on Instagram. Is definitely what I would use more. It's also Ruth's Birthing. So I have been using those. I can't say
Great.
they get updated a ton, but I love teaching classes and I have had so much fun. I've gotten a lot more classes over the summer and I've really, really enjoyed working with all those couples. It's crazy how connected I feel with all of them afterwards. And I'm like,
Oh, I
I want to
know.
keep up with all of you.
I know. I know. I always feel like a little like a mama hen. And I'm like, oh, my
Uh-huh.
little chickadees are going out into the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like
I
All
texting
grown
them
up
every week.
and knowing what to do.
exactly. Yeah.
I'm like, how do you feel this week? Are you doing okay? It's getting close.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Ruth. Thanks for spending this time with us and telling us your stories. I think there's so much power in sharing birth stories and preparing your mind and your heart and with other women's experiences. So thank you so much. And
Of
we
course, it
will
was my pleasure.
uh, okay, well, we will see you back here next week. Like, subscribe, leave us a review.